Hey guys, today we're in the book of Genesis, chapter 28. Yesterday we left off with Rebecca going to Isaac and telling him she doesn't want her son to marry the Hittite women. And Isaac needs to send Jacob away. And so today we see that. So it says that Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him that you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Notice this. It says that he blessed him and he directed him. Isaac has come around to the story. He has now given in to what we say is God's will. He wanted Esau to go further, but now, after everything that's happened, he now is understanding. He's seen his wrong, and now he is giving a blessing to Jacob, and then also gives him encouragement for godly living moving forward, because he is now the covenant keeper that he, just like Isaac himself, Isaac was forbid by Abraham to marry a Canaanite woman. Isaac is doing the same thing for his son. Do not marry ungodly people, marry a people who will believe in God. And so he says, don't do this. He says, go away, that you may go to Lebanon, marry one of the daughters of Lebanon, your mother's brother. So here his dad is saying, go marry your cousin. Now remember, this is not Kentucky, okay? But this is going back to the Ur of Chaldeans, back to what we would call Babylon today, Iraq today. And so he says, the God Almighty, which is El Shaddai, God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give you, notice this, the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring. So this is saying not just blessing his son, but now he's saying the promise that God gave Abraham in Genesis 12, and the God who has given me the promise, Isaac, I am now giving to you my son Jacob. So he is keeping this Abrahamic covenant in the family and doing what God said from the beginning. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away. Now Esau saw that Isaac had been blessed by Jacob and sent away, and heard that he must not marry a Canaanite wife. And so Esau saw this, and Esau went to Ishmael, right? Remember the son of Abraham, of Hagar. And so he goes to Ishmael. He goes outside of the promised land. He goes to Ishmael, and here he marries the daughter of Ishmael. And her name is Mathala. She will have a different name time we get a couple chapters down the road, and I'll explain to that as we get there. But Jacob left the promised land, and he goes to Haran, the Ur of Chaldeans, and he came to a certain place and stayed there overnight. And he took a big stone and he put it under his head. And notice this, verse 12, it says, and he dreamed. He had a dream, not any kind of dream. This is a God-inspired vision. And what is this dream? It says, behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth at the top, and it reached to the heaven, and behold, its angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So he sees people coming in and out of heaven. And he said, and the Lord stood above it, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. And now he's talking to Jacob. And he says, I will give you and your offspring like the dust of the earth, spread from the west to the east, the north and the south, and all the offspring of the earth. You will be blessed. You will be blessed. All the nations of the earth will be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you will go. So in this dream, Jacob sees this vision where God is there, and there is a ladder of people coming in and out, and they're having access to God. And in this, God tells him, I'm going to be with you, and I am with you right now. But notice this. This is a good thing, but Jacob doesn't catch on completely. Notice verse 17. He says, and he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? He did not understand that God was with him wherever he goes. He was thinking that God was with him right there in that particular spot. That's why he says that how awesome is this this place where he slept, the place where he had this dream, this place where he had this conversation with God. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone and he had put under his head, and he set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it, and he called and named it the place of Bethel, or Bethel. But the name of the city was Luz at the first. Bethel will be important, both for the good and for the bad. Of all the places in the Old Testament, Jerusalem is mentioned number 1, Bethel is mentioned number 2. It is the second named city in all of the Old Testament. But what will be a good place, but it will also be a bad place. In a couple chapters, God will call himself the God of Bethel, or Bethel. He will say, I am the God of that place where Jacob had that dream. But hundreds of years later, we will find that Bethel will become a place of idolatry and adultery, where people will use that place to worship false gods against the God of Bethel. So it becomes an interesting place, but it's mentioned a lot. So just keep that and put that back in your mind. Verse 20, God made a vow saying, notice what Jacob says to God. If God will be with me, then he will keep me as I go. He will give me bread, and he will give me clothing to wear. Right? This is an interesting thing, right? God says, I'm with you and I will never leave you. And now we have Jacob making a vow saying, well, if God is going to go with me, he will never let me be hungry. He will never let me be thirsty, and he will give me all the nice things. Can you imagine? Can you imagine you saying that to God right now? You would be looking up to see lightning come down, but that's where Jacob is, right? This is the idea that he has of God. And so he continues, it says, so when I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. If God goes with me, if he makes sure that I never want for anything, if I go in peace, if I always have blessing, when I come back, then I will make God my God. We can already see that Jacob doesn't have the right attitude or the right faith in God that is needed. That will change, but for now, that's where he is at. And so he takes, and this stone that he put under his head, he set up for a pillar. This shall be God's house, and all that you have given me, I will give a full tenth for you. All that God will bless him, he says, I'll give God a tenth back. Now, this is kind of a weird story, but it's an important story because 2 reasons, right? The question is, where's Jesus in that? We have 2 prophecies of Jesus. If you go back in verse 12, it says that he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on earth. He says, I saw God was on top, and there were angels ascending and descending. There is access to God. In the New Testament, in the book of John, chapter 1, verse 51, God says, after me, you will see people ascending and descending to the throne of heaven. Here, he's saying Jesus is the ladder from earth to heaven. There will be access to heaven is the dream that Jacob had, and Jesus is the ladder. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the access. But then again, in verse 14, we see that it is the seed of Jacob. Remember, it says, I will bless you to the north, to the south, to the east, and the west. And he says, and you shall be a blessing to all the families on the earth. This is saying that the seed, the Messiah, will come from Jacob. And we can see this in the book of Luke, chapter 3. We see the genealogy of Mary, and it tells us that from the genealogy there was Abraham, there was Isaac, and there was Jacob. And so we can see that the Messiah will come from Jacob. And right here, God is telling that in the dream. I hope that makes sense. So we see a lot of Jesus in the very beginning, first book of the Bible. Hope that makes sense. We will see you tomorrow in chapter 29. God bless.